What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you today to break down our top 12 Dynasty quarterback rankings. We're going to be doing a series the next couple days going over all of our top 12s. Maybe we'll do top 15s for running backs and wide receivers to celebrate the fact that we are launching our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0, which dropped today. If you guys want access to it, link will be down below in the pinned comment and in the description. Patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. But basically, we're going to go over the landscape of each of these positions, talk about the value pockets, talk about, the players themselves and how we value them in terms of the strategy overall at each position group. So before we get into it, if you guys enjoy at any point, you know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. I think we're like 5 or 6 subscribers away from 18K. So definitely appreciate all the support. But without further ado, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And as you guys know, the position of quarterback is just one that's near and dear to our hearts over here at FSC. I mean, we've been talking about prioritizing this position, prioritizing the elite talent at this position, because you want to remove as much volatility as possible at this position. You want to make sure that you're getting these studs. And I'll tell you what, all of these top 12 guys are insanely valuable options, top 15 level options in Dynasty Fantasy Football, period, if you're in Superflex.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues are the type of leagues we play in, but even these guys are quite valuable in 1 quarterback leagues as well. So before we get into it, let's hit the intro. Okay, so with each of these position groups, we're going to kind of talk about general strategy first, and then we'll get into the players themselves. The quarterback strategy is quite simple. Elite quarterbacks are gold in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues, and if you do not believe me, try and trade for one. I've been sending out offers all morning in one of my leagues because I have Patrick Mahomes already. I'm trying to secure another elite quarterback to go along with Patrick Mahomes in a league where I'm rebuilding. I'm trying to get that elite shell like we talk about, get those 2 elite quarterbacks, and then build out the rest of my roster. In the Manifesto 2.0, which, like I said before the intro, we dropped today, and that's available, link down below in the pinned comment. We have rookie pick values assigned to these players, right? Each player has, this player you can get for a late first, this player you can get for a mid second, whatever the case is, to determine what we think their market value is. The only assets in Dynasty right now in our manifesto that are commanding 3+ first rounders of value are our top 7 quarterbacks. And 4 of the 7 assets that command 2 first rounders plus are also quarterbacks, are, quarterbacks 8 to 11 or 8 to 12. And the other guys being Chase Jefferson and Pitts and a tight end premium. So these guys are very valuable. They're some of the most valuable assets in Dynasty, especially if you play in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, again, like you said, try to trade for some of these guys. Try to trade for Josh Allen. Try to trade for Patrick Mahomes. We have listed here as 3+ first rounders, but there are some owners, like if you have Josh Allen, if you have Patrick Mahomes, somebody has them in your league, realistically, like you could offer 4 first rounders. You could offer 4 first rounders and a quarterback. There are some managers that can't let that player go. And realistically, the values are a baseline in terms of what exactly we would project on the market. At the end of the day here, sometimes swinging these deals for these elite 101, 102, 103 overall and startups period assets are nearly impossible to trade for. And that's why if you're able to hit one cheap, if you were to hit Josh Allen in 2019 prior to his blow up in 2020, where he was going on that 2-3 turn, or Patrick Mahomes when he was still the backup of Alex Smith, or like, Dak Prescott picking him up before he ended up, being a stud once Tony Romo got hurt. If you were able to get those little pieces, they are the easiest ascension of values in the entirety of Superflex, in the entirety of Dynasty Fantasy Football. Hitting on an elite quarterback, seeing that ascension, and basically seeing a player that you picked up for nearly free go to be worth, multiple first-round picks like you mentioned. So, yeah, hitting on the quarterback, understanding, which quarterbacks are most likely to increase value and which quarterbacks are most likely to hold their value is ultimately how you get that biggest leg up on the rest of your competition.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point about when you find a value pocket on elite quarterbacks, you're going to buy them. We're going to break that down once we get to the actual players. But I personally, this August, traded 3 mid to late 2023 first rounders. They all ended up being, I believe, 107 or later. I think it was like the 107, 110, and 111 in exchange for Justin Herbert, an early 2023 second, which is actually the 201. So very much not a big difference between one of the first that I gave. And then a late 2023 second. I was able to acquire Justin Herbert for a guy that decided he wanted to rebuild and he wanted picks. I mean, that's another value pocket that you can find for these quarterbacks too, is people that realize that their team isn't good enough. And they're like, you know what? I need to sell off everybody. I need to sell off all my assets. And they start selling a 23-and-a-half-year-old quarterback like Justin Herbert, who he could very easily have held through his rebuild for, I would say 60 cents on the dollar.
My biggest general rule of thumb, I'm not trading elite quarterbacks in general, but if you ever are in a position where you just have these guys, which by the way, if you just have elite quarterbacks on your team, just hold and keep building around them, because by 3-4 years, your team's going to be absolutely loaded. But if you have to must trade one of these guys, you got to make sure you're getting another upside quarterback back. The purpose of tearing down isn't just to say, I have Josh Allen, therefore I'm going to take 4 first-round picks for him. You need some type of quarterback equity back in most quarterback markets, because as we know, if you're able to, hit on a guy that is quote unquote considered a tear down and he ends up, ascending like Jalen Hurts, like realistically, there were some deals you could have made last year with Jalen Hurts when he was still, a 2-3 turn level value. And you were tearing down from like Kyler Murray to Jalen Hurts and getting like a first-round pick or 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about working the market, all about securing these guys, because like we said at the beginning, when you have them, they're gold. They're impossible to trade for, and they're very much not guys that you want to give up easily in trade. So we're going to start with the top 12 quarterback rankings. If you guys skipped ahead to this part, the first guy that we're going to talk about is Josh Allen, who's been our consensus QB1 for probably a year and a half, 2 years now. I'll let you take it away with him.
Yeah, consensus QB1 overall, consensus quarterback one of the prime bucket, like you guys can see on the screen. Josh Allen is the absolute definition of game changer in fantasy football. Top 3 quarterback in points per game each of his last 3 seasons, each of those seasons having over 24 points per game. He's just a unicorn. You're getting a guy with a legitimate 40 passing touchdown ceiling, 5,000 passing yard ceiling, and ultimately a guy is going to give you 600 to 800 rushing yards and like 6 to 9 rushing touchdowns a year. The situational insulation is at hand as well. High octane offense, elite number 1 wide receiver, great coaching. We know the Bills are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL each and every year with Josh Allen at the helm. And you're combining the situational insulation, the production insulation, with the elite talent insulation. Even if we don't want to acknowledge this on the face value, we have to understand that the market's going to work based off how other people view these certain assets. And as we know, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, these guys are viewed as elite talents in the NFL. So therefore, if, Josh Allen tore his ACL, or, he was dealing with that elbow sprain earlier in this year, even through all of that uncertainty, that questionability, his value didn't drop a single cent. Even when Josh Allen was faced with the possibility of not playing for the rest of the year and getting elbow surgery, he was still worth a top 2 pick in Superflex in terms of relative value. That's the level of insulation you get with investing in one of these assets. And if you hold them, you can get a king's ransom anytime, any snap of the finger. So ultimately, Josh Allen and Mahomes are the clear faces of the NFL, clear top 2 faces for dynasty fantasy football. And then you're getting a mix here of elite value over replacement with Josh Allen, combined, like I said, with that value insulation. So Patrick Mahomes, like you'll get into in a second, are the clear-cut number 1 and number 2 quarterbacks in Dynasty.
Yeah, I think it's under discussed how big the difference between, like you said, value over replacement that some of these guys give you, both from like a year-over-year perspective in fantasy, because back in the day, the best quarterback in the league in fantasy football wasn't that much better than like the QB12, which is what spawned the late round quarterback strategy. But nowadays, because we have these dual threat guys, these guys that are elite passing ceiling dudes with Josh Allen that can also give you a ton on the ground, they are a lot more value above replacement. You're talking about one starting spot in your starting lineup for a guy like Josh Allen, who can put up, like you said, 24 points per game each of the last 3 seasons. He's definitely worth the first overall pick. He's definitely worth, 4+ first rounders in a trade, as is the next guy, which is Patrick Mahomes, quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. Like you said, in the prime bucket in our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0, we have these guys listed, from veteran quarterbacks, 30+ years old, prime quarterbacks, 25 to 29, which is where both of these guys fit in, and then young quarterbacks, rebuilding type of quarterbacks who are younger than the age of 25. Mahomes is the QB2 of that prime bucket. He's the best pure quarterback in football. Everybody would probably say that, I'd imagine. At least 4,500 passing yards and 35+ passing touchdowns in 4 of the 5 seasons that he's been the starting quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, the only one being that Super Bowl year where he missed a couple games here and there. He's tethered to Andy Reid, like you said, a stable franchise situation, kind of insulated there. Think prime Aaron Rodgers from a talent perspective, too. We know exactly what he can be, how safe of a passing projection this guy can be. He just lost a top 5 receiver in fantasy football, in real football, and still put up an elite season with Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, MVS. Outside of Travis Kelce, he was really piecing together the rest of that team. And like Danny mentioned, Mahomes could tear his ACL tomorrow in the divisional round game that we're going to have this weekend, and he would still be a top 3 startup pick.
Number 3 quarterback in our overall rankings, consensus quarterback one of our foundational bucket, happens to be Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. As you guys know, I'm a big Cowboys fan, but I mean, you got to take bias aside when you're talking about assets, because Jalen Hurts, I mean, he is the clear-cut quarterback 3 in Dynasty, because we just saw a season this year that not only was great, not only would have ranked as the quarterback 1 if he played every single game this year, was legitimately historic. Nearly 27 points per game, 26.8 points per game from the quarterback position, including 35 total touchdowns in 15 games, 13 of them being rushing touchdowns. It's absurd. You can argue right now, given the age and given the production value, that Jalen Hurts is right there with Mahomes and Allen. The thing is, though, and again, we mentioned, if you're just looking at production and you want to put Hurts there, go ahead. But once you combine everything together and you understand that the market's going to favor Allen and Mahomes if any downside risk were to happen, that's why I think that those guys are a tier ahead. But make no mistake, Jalen Hurts, really, really good consolation prize here. Elite situation, elite number 1 wide receiver, great offensive line, Devontae Smith as well, really good coaching. I mean, there's just nothing to be said here. You can make the argument that this guy's the quarterback 1 next year in redraft. So the fact is, you're getting that 23, 24-year-old quarterback for the next 10 plus years of his career. Sign me the hell up. The only problem, again, that I mentioned, because he's not that elite level passer that an Allen or Mahomes is, I feel like the market, again, is going to be much more volatile to the downside risk if anything were to happen to Hurts regarding injury, regarding, A.J. Brown goes down, Nick Sirianni leaves. Any type of negative situation is going to impact him more than the top 2. So therefore, there's a tiny little tier gap there.
Yeah, and I mean, even if we just saw a stretch of like down play, I'm sure people would, maybe chalk it up to, okay, maybe his 2022 season was a little bit of an aberration. This is maybe more in line.
We've seen it with Lamar.
Yeah, we've seen it with Lamar Jackson as a perfect example. I think Jalen Hurts has already proven more as a passer than Lamar Jackson probably has ever proven. And like you said, that 13 rushing touchdowns, obviously big time production on the ground there. So yeah, Jalen Hurts, I traded him to you in our Tone Setters Dynasty League because I needed help in the fantasy finals, in the fantasy championship, or the second round of the fantasy finals. And I'm really regretting it. You don't want to give up these. I got Justin Fields in return, so obviously I got a great piece in return, but you don't want to give up these top guys. That's just how it feels when you give them up, and that's why they're so valuable. No manager wants to give up Jalen Hurts. No manager wants to give up the next guy, Joe Burrow, quarterback 4 for us of the Cincinnati Bengals, quarterback 3 of the in his prime bucket. Burrow, you could make the argument on par with Patrick Mahomes as far as like a pure quarterback, a pure passing quarterback. He's tethered to a young, already supremely talented offense with weapons like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Obviously, we're going to have some questions in the coming years relating to, can they keep the band together? Can they re-sign all these guys? T. Higgins in a contract year this year, as is Joe Burrow. And then Jamar Chase will be up for his extension next year. Obviously, these guys are going to command a lot of money on the open market. Therefore, they're going to need to be paid like superstar wide receivers and quarterbacks. This kind of has a similar feel to like old school Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb kind of like feel to it, where Randall Cobb was like a back end wide receiver 1, Jordy Nelson, an elite wide receiver 1, and Aaron Rodgers like the best quarterback in fantasy. When you're picking this high in the draft with a guy like Joe Burrow, you want to draft a player who has elite ability, which we know he has, who has longevity because he plays quarterback, who has value insulation with a good offense, changing situation, injury. I mean, we already saw this dude tear his ACL once, and it really didn't affect all that much his value, and he was a rookie when he did it. So if he tore his ACL again now, then we'd really have no concerns. Number 1, he already came back from one, and number 2, now we know he's an elite quarterback, and he was a top 5 startup pick. He probably slides a little bit, but not a ton. He's, again, right there with Jalen Hurts as the next tier down, as like the mini, QB 1.5 tier.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, obviously, again, you're going to argue if Hurts is at a ceiling, his production value will outweigh Burrow. So that's why we have him higher. But at the same time, like Joe Burrow's value insulation in terms of negative circumstance, he's proven everything he needed to. He took the Bengals to the Super Bowl last year. He's got them in the divisional round this year. Everybody who's watched NFL football knows that realistically, Joe Burrow's a top 5 level quarterback in the NFL. So again, if we saw Chase go down this year, nothing happened to his value. We saw Joe Burrow, like you mentioned, go down in his rookie year. Nothing happened to his value. He's proven every single year that he's going to play 16, 17 games. He's always a threat to be around that 35 plus passing touchdown area, 4,500 plus passing yard area. And I mean, we saw this year too. He contributes a little bit with his legs too, much more athletic than people want to give him credit for. Yeah, I think he's a clear top 4 level option. Consensus quarterback 3 of our prime bucket, which oddly enough is funny because we mentioned, Jalen Hurts, who was in his draft class, is the quarterback 1 of the foundational bucket. The fact that they're, a bucket apart just kind of, is funny because Burrow obviously entered the NFL at an older age than Hurts. So, I mean, he's in a completely different bucket. Moving on, though, and the third quarterback in a row from this draft class, from this 2020 draft class, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers, consensus quarterback 2 of our foundational bucket. He is the ultimate, value and projection versus production player. Because if you just looked at his 2022 stats, you'd be underwhelmed. He was the quarterback 11 overall. As we know, disappointing season. Many know that. But at the end of the day, we got to isolate this 1 year of production from a 24-year-old elite quarterback from what he actually represents. We know Justin Herbert had a disappointing season. He was only the quarterback 11 overall in fantasy football, not really up to par with his first 2 years. But at the end of the day, we have to isolate this from what he actually represents as a dynasty asset. We're not talking about what he represented in redraft last year. If you want to, adjust him down the ranks a little bit in redraft because you're a little bit worried about the situation, go ahead. But in real life, in dynasty, long-term projection, this is an elite top 5 level passer in the NFL, elite standing, over 22 points per game in his first 2 seasons as a starter, which if you were to take either of his point totals from 2020 or 2021, it would have ranked as the quarterback 4 in points per game this year. As we know, this season is an anomaly because he had injuries to his weapons, bad coordinator play. There's a lot of change that's going to be happening this offseason, but you're getting the next closest player to Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes to be ascending to that top 3 if he were to hit the nuts. We already saw it last offseason. Justin Herbert was the consensus 103 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Heck, some people were taking him as the 102 ahead of Patrick Mahomes. That is the level of projection we're getting there. Elite level passer, 6'6", rocket arm. They just need to, make some adjustments in this offense. And still only 24. You're getting one of the few guys in the NFL, like I mentioned with Mahomes and Allen, that has 5,000 passing yards, 45 passing touchdowns in his range of outcomes. And you're getting a little bit of a discount on it.
Yeah, I mean, he also had half the rushing yards he had last year. He had 0 rushing touchdowns compared to 3 that he had in 2021 when he was the QB2 as a second-year quarterback at age 23 years old. It's pretty insane to me that, people are, coming out of the woodworks calling him a social media quarterback, that he's not actually that good. We're talking about a dude that literally has been a top 8 fantasy quarterback as a rookie, top 2 fantasy quarterback his second season. What are we doing here? Like they're gonna, I mean, Rashawn Slater went down like week 3 of the NFL season last year. He was an all-pro left tackle. So that obviously puts him at a disadvantage. He was dealing with his own injuries. Keenan Allen was out for like 7 games. Mike Williams was out for a couple games. They're probably going to add, I would imagine, some receiving talent to, influx some youth into that group as well. And, we saw even guys like Josh Palmer take some steps forward this year. So going into next season, I think Justin Herbert will be one of the biggest discounts in Dynasty and in redraft at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to quickly add, you mentioned Josh Palmer. Wouldn't mind another Josh wearing that Charger blue going into next year. That'd be pretty dope if they got Josh Downs. But all jokes aside, I mean, they need speed on this offense. They need a young receiver that they could build around. And I mean, you just got to unlock that third portion, that deep portion of the field with Justin Herbert, the level of arm talent that this guy has. Absolutely out of the fucking wazoo here. We can move on, though. Quarterback 6, and a guy, like we said, you can argue with being higher. He had a season just a few years ago where he legitimately broke fantasy football. Take it away with Lamar Jackson, our consensus quarterback 4 of the prime bucket.
Yeah, by far the guy with the most uncertainty, I would say, so far that we've talked about. We have him listed as a soft buy, which in our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0, we have guys listed as hard buys, soft buys, hard sells, and soft sells, and then holds based on keep trade cut value versus our consensus here at FSE. So if that interests you, again, check it out. The reason being for Lamar's uncertainty is because he's disappointed fantasy owners in recent years, especially going out when it mattered most, right? With ticky-tack injuries, he wasn't there for the fantasy playoffs either of the last 2 years. And now we have an impending contract situation that presents some more uncertainty, right? People don't know if he's going to be in Baltimore. People don't know if he's going to get traded to the Falcons or whatever the case is. And for those reasons, you can get a sizable discount on Lamar Jackson right now, who we believe should still be valued around, 3 first-round picks, or a young quarterback like Tua, for example, plus a first-round pick, and maybe even 2 ones and a wide receiver 3 type or something like that. Maybe enough to get it done in this current market with Lamar Jackson. The bottom line is that these like bad seasons that he's had the past couple of years have still been QB6, QB7, and QB8 in points per game. This guy's never finished below quarterback 8 in points per game in his starting career. Like that kind of safety is unheard of in fantasy outside of, some of the quarterbacks we've talked about so far and Travis Kelce. Like literally that year over year consistency, safety at that position doesn't exist outside of some of these top guys. And we know, like you said, in 2019, he has league breaking upside, 28 points per game that year that he showed in 2019, throwing to Willie Snead and, whoever else he was throwing to that year. If we get a healthy Rashad Bateman, we get a healthy, Mark Andrews, we get J.K. Dobbins in the running game back on track. Maybe they add another receiver or two. Then this dude can still be a 25 plus, maybe even 30 point per game type of producer. And you're getting a massive discount on him because of, mainly a lot of narrative and, fool me once kind of talk.
This past year, even when he was healthy before the knee injury, lost Rashad Bateman, throwing to Demarcus Robinson, J.K. Dobbins dealing with that knee injury. And this offense, we saw how much it just absolutely fell off a cliff once Lamar Jackson got hurt. And despite that, like you said, still top 8 in points per game. So we got to choose one side here. Is the situation good and it's the reason why it's quote unquote inflating Lamar Jackson's value, like some people want to say? Or on the flip side, is the situation so bad he's producing in spite of it? And now we're looking forward that he could potentially be a Jet. He could potentially be a Lion. He could potentially be a Miami Dolphin. Like we got so much opportunity here for not only Lamar to hold his value if he's a Raven, but if he does move on, we're legitimately talking about, Miami throwing a Tyreek, throwing a fucking Jalen Waddle, Detroit throwing a Monroe St. Brown, DeAndre Swift. We're getting these elite situations that Lamar's getting linked to. So why are we fading him is what I don't understand.
Yeah. No arguments there. I think we can move on from these. I think these are pretty consensus, these top guys. This next guy is somebody that has definitely made a pretty meteoric rise. He was highly valued coming into the season, but now we got a solidified top 8 startup pick.
Yeah, this is Herbert Jr. Like the exact same case I just made for Justin Herbert. 6'6", rocket arm, elite standing in the NFL. Like this is like the golden generation, if you will, of the young quarterbacks, the young aliens, if you will, because that's what these guys are. 6'6", 220 plus pounds, rocket arm, mobile. Like they are legitimate aliens in terms of what they could do on the football field. Trevor Lawrence is a carbon copy of Herbert. And it's funny because we just saw them duke it out in wildcard weekend. Like I said, elite passing ceiling, situation where the Jaguars on offense can only get better. Already traded for Calvin Ridley. Doug Peterson has showed he's one of the best head coaches in the NFL. An improving situation around him. Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, if they bring him back. Like we got a lot to be looking forward to here when it comes to Trevor Lawrence. And I think that these are two of the guys in the top 10 that have the best long-term appeal. If you're looking for that guy that will he be this elite signal caller, 10 plus years down the line? I think you can safely say that Herbert and Trevor Lawrence are going to be storming the league by, 2032, if you will. So you're getting that level of insulation. You're getting that level of talent. You're getting that level of upside with the situation. It's, a common theme to understand why this guy's valued so highly. We were talking about a guy that even last year going into startups, he was a 3rd round pick despite being awful as a rookie. Now that he showed that he's this elite quarterback and he played like it, I have no problem if you want to spend a top 8 overall pick on him. You can make the argument, Herbert versus Trev, who you'd prefer. I would still prefer Herbert because I feel like he's proven more at this point of his career. But again, like I mentioned, both have that long-term top 5 level startup pick value in terms of what we can project by like 2027, 2028.
Yeah, you can make the argument for him over a guy like Burrow too, given the age, if you're going for more of a rebuilding kind of situation. And you can make the argument for him over Lamar, given the uncertainty as well. So if you wanted to have him as high as like quarterback 5, I probably wouldn't even, blink an eye. The awesome thing too is knowing that you could get, if you pick like, let's say middle to late part of the first round, you get a guy like Trevor Lawrence and you can pair him with one of the guys that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes as your second quarterback would be definitely an ideal situation, an ideal startup. If you can go with Trevor Lawrence and Dak at the 1-2 turn or something like that, would be crazy. So yeah, nothing really to add there. Trevor Lawrence has shown exactly what we saw from him at Clemson, which made him, the Andrew Luck caliber prospect that he was. And I think Andrew Luck is probably a decent career trajectory for what we could see. Only this time, looks like we have an offense and a team that's actually building around him properly, unlike they were doing in Indianapolis. And like you said, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, some of these weapons, this could definitely be, a Philadelphia Eagles situation all over again, where Trevor Lawrence, becomes a top 5 fantasy quarterback, maybe even top 3 this time next year on the back of like a 40 passing touchdown MVP caliber season.
Yep. No, 100 agree or 100%. And again, quarterback 3 consensus of our foundational bucket, but He's the quarterback 4 for me in this bucket. You can take it away and you can talk about my quarterback 3, our consensus 4, with Justin Fields of the Chicago Bears. You mentioned the fucking Jalen Hurts comp. I'll just let you get through it.
Yeah, I mean, you are higher on Justin Fields than I am,
Yeah.
so I'll give like the more cautious take for Justin Fields because I would prefer Trevor Lawrence for sure. And I know,
Definitely fair.
Justin Fields has outproduced him this year. He was quarterback 5 in points per game in just his second season, both players in their second season. You can also make the argument that Trevor Lawrence was in a much better situation than Justin Fields as well. And we're talking about a guy that was the architect of the most run-heavy offense since 2005. Like, we're talking about, prehistoric days of the early 2000s when all they did was run the ball. This is the most run-heavy offense that we've seen since the 2005 Steelers that rotated in, Jerome Bettis and all these running backs en route to a Super Bowl win. A lot of people will point to the fact that Justin Fields is not a good passer. 30th ranked true passer rating this year. Other metrics where they don't want him relative to guys like Trevor Lawrence and other better passers. And that's a fair concern. I share that concern with you to some degree, but we're essentially talking about, the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts career trajectory all over again. If you can't pass at a high level right now, early in your career, second year in your career, like Justin Fields was this past year, run until you can pass. That's exactly what we saw, right? He couldn't pass yet, but he started running and things opened up for the offense, which made it easier for him to pass. And Fields led all quarterbacks with 1,143 rushing yards, top 3 across the board in rushing touchdowns, red zone carries overall. The top 5 weeks that we got out of this guy, 2 of which were in like the 40-point range, is enough for you to say that this guy is an elite ceiling fantasy quarterback because of what he provides on the ground as a third-year starter coming into, an offense in a situation, hopefully where they add some more passing weapons, potentially an elite wide receiver. They have a chance with the number 1 overall pick. They're probably going to spend it on a defensive player if they sit and pick, but if they trade down, then we could be talking about receiving talent, offensive line talent, additional picks on day 2 to be able to really build out this roster. And we could be looking at a very good situation long-term for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, and you mentioned I'm comparatively higher, and I understand there is risk, like you mentioned. Like, he's not there as a passer quite yet, but like you said, neither was Josh Allen, neither was Jalen Hurts going into the year. And the teams recognized the elite talent that they had, and they made sure they surrounded them with the resources to be able to succeed. Obviously, a couple years ago, trading for Stephon Diggs with the Buffalo Bills, and then last offseason, trading for A.J. Brown, drafting Devontae Smith, having that offensive line there for Jalen Hurts. So when a team recognizes a player with this talent, a player with this dual threat capability, their main project, their main goal needs to be surrounding them with elite talent. The Bears don't have that yet. However, what they do have, and projecting forward, this is what we do, what they do have is the most cap space in the NFL, a ton of draft equity. We're talking about, multiple picks in the first few rounds. And as you mentioned, an opportunity to get more picks with that number 1 overall. You go to Indianapolis, say, hey, listen, 4th overall, 2024 first round pick. You want this quarterback, you're going to pay the price. Then you could even leverage the 4th overall pick. You have so many outs, so many opportunities to increase the own value of the draft equity you have at hand. What does that do? Okay, you draft the Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Jack Smith and Jigga type. You could do that. You could trade for a veteran, maybe a DeAndre Hopkins, maybe, a Devontae Adams. Trade for one of those guys. You draft offensive line. You sign offensive line. Like, there's so many possibilities with what this Bears front office can do to support their young 23-year-old franchise quarterback. So, yes, I am projecting forward. I understand it's a risk having him, 7th overall in my rankings. But the risk is well worth the reward. If he gets that surrounding cast and he proves that he's the caliber of player that at least Jalen Hurts is, I think projecting Josh Allen is tough for anybody, to be honest. But if he becomes Jalen Hurts, man, like, we're legitimately talking about a younger version of Jalen Hurts with potentially more opportunity as a passer. I think he's got a stronger arm. And if he could develop that portion of the game, I think he could be a better passer long term.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't even mention a lot of the reason that A.J. Brown was traded was contract disputes, right? The 2020 wide receiver class is very good. Who's to say that Michael Pittman Jr. doesn't get traded? Who's to say T. Higgins or Jerry Jeudy or, God forbid, CeeDee Lamb or somebody like that gets traded ahead of, their team not wanting to drop $25 million a season? Maybe even Justin Jefferson doesn't get paid by the Minnesota Vikings. Like, we don't know in Dynasty, right? We have no idea. What we do know is we have an immensely talented quarterback with a team with a ton of cap space that's willing to build around him. So, yeah, definitely very excited for Justin Fields' future. And Deshaun Watson, the guy that, like I said, is the biggest buy in all of Dynasty right now.
Yeah, I mean, you handled him a lot on the quarterback buys and sells video. You guys know the bull case already, why we're buying. But I mean, I'm just going to add to that consensus quarterback 5 of the prime bucket, obviously playing for the Cleveland Browns now. He's a player that will obviously catch the most buzz on this video. I mean, people are going to be either super outraged that we have him this high. Some people are going to be like, I'm glad you recognize he's still an elite player. I'm glad you have him this high because other people don't. He is the most, divisive player right now at the quarterback position because let's not forget, when this guy is healthy, when this guy is fully acclimated to his offense, he is easily one of the top 5 to 10 quarterbacks in the NFL at minimum. He got his rust knocked off in 2022. Admittedly, he was terrible this year, but he got that rust knocked off. But we got to contextualize, like I said in that video, he returned to the team after not practicing, getting familiarity with the system, getting familiarity with his teammates. He just returned. He returned for that Houston Texans game, and you could clearly tell that was a player that hasn't played in 2 years. But when we saw him last, when he was fully healthy, when he was playing for the Houston Texans, a team that finished in the bottom 5 of the NFL, he had 23.5 fantasy points per game and legitimately presents 35 plus passing touchdown, 5K plus total yards in his range of outcomes. Again, if he hits the ceiling, we're talking about, like you said on your tweet, a couple weeks ago, 13th among quarterbacks in terms of PFF grade in 2018, 8th in 2019, 3rd in 2020, 92.5 PFF grade in 2020, prior to all the bullshit we've been dealing with him for the last 2 years. If he gets back to that level of player and you're getting him at 27 years old, you have a legitimate shot at breaking your fantasy football league. Because, again, we have him ranked at 9. We have him ranked inside our top 10. But in some leagues, we hold him at first-round startup value. There could be leagues where you have him, buy him at second or third-round startup value because he didn't look good this year.
Yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of people that start off their drafts with like Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson for a rebuilding type of situation, or they get a Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson at the end of the first round, who we're going to talk about in a second. Yeah, he's a great quarterback, and I know it pisses everybody off when you say nice things about Deshaun Watson, but he's an elite quarterback, and that's why he got a huge amount of money. And that 2020 season that he had 23.5 fantasy points per game, DeAndre Hopkins wasn't there. He was throwing to Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks and some other guys there. He can do it with Amari Cooper in the run game that he has, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, who took a step forward this year. Hopefully we get something out of David Bell, and maybe they add another receiver. David Njoku obviously took a big step this year. I think he has the weapons. He has the offensive line that he has never had in Houston as well. So I really am very bullish on Deshaun Watson.
Yep. No, fully agree. And that's the trends we got to spot when there's a player, when there's a piece, when there's an asset in the market that's getting undervalued due to uncertainty, because that's what Deshaun Watson is. People don't automatically think, he's a terrible quarterback, even though the play that would indicate that. They're more so scared and uncertain. Not that he'll, maintain this terrible quarterback, but that he'll get back to where he was. And I'll be real, 6 games in 2022 is not going to dissuade me from thinking he can get back to an 80-plus graded passer, 400 or 500 rushing yards, 4 or 5+ rushing touchdowns in that situation. And as you know, with the weapons at hand, with the arm that he has, he could legitimately break fantasy football.
Yeah. Are we going to trust a 40-game sample size of him being an elite quarterback, or a 6-game sample size off of 2 years and probably the most emotional stress he's gone through in his entire life? Whether he's guilty or not, it probably was not easy for him to focus on football during 100%. This time. He will probably be, much better in 2023, and that's the bet that I'm making as well. We can move on to the quarterback 10 consensus for us here, who would probably be higher if he didn't suffer an injury. Quarterback Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals, consensus QB6 of our prime bucket. I think, again, he's one of the better buy lows in fantasy right now. Yeah, he's not going to be back on the field and probably until probably mid-season this year. And he likely won't run at a high level in that first season coming off of the ACL tear. But kind of as we talked about with Joe Burrow and these other guys that have suffered major injuries, Kyler Murray, like Lamar Jackson, in a down season this year with a team that was pretty awful, a coach that got fired before the season was over, finished as QB7 points per game, the lowest since his quarterback 11 finish as a rookie. Sandwiched between those in 2020 and 2021 was 2 top 4 overall quarterback finishes at over 22 points per game, highest being over 24 points per game in 2020. Fake sharp Cliff Kingsbury's gone. We don't know what the Cardinals are going to do. Obviously, we all want, Sean Payton to come and work with Kyler Murray. We don't know if that's a guarantee, but I think even whoever they hire, it's probably going to be as good, if not better, than Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we know Kyler Murray, when he's at his ceiling, is a legitimate top 5 producer at the quarterback position. Elite legs, arm talent. I mean, I think this guy's thrown, over 25 touchdowns in each of the last 2 years he's been healthy. Like he's a freak of nature. And obviously with Kyler Murray, the narrative against him is that you get some consistency issues as a passer. But I mean, like you said, there's a lot of coaching mishaps going on there with Cliff Kingsbury. They brought a guy in who had a terrible record in college, who couldn't win in college. And then we're bringing him into the NFL and basically saying, hey, take the reins with our young, 20-year, or when he got drafted,
25.
21? No, but because Cliff Kingsbury drafted him, what was he, 21, 22 when he got drafted?
Yeah, he's 25
right?
now, so he would have been 20, 21, 22 when he was drafted.
So basically, throughout his career, he's never had a set, true head coach that could really get the best out of him. You mentioned Sean Payton. Obviously, Ben Johnson would have been a great hire as well. He ended up going back to Detroit, but there's a lot of good coaching candidates in this cycle. So if you're Kyler Murray, 90+% of them are upgrades over Cliff Kingsbury, what he brought.
Yeah, pretty much. He was the schematic genius with no scheme. So, let's move on to the quarterback 11, a guy that, I like having him as my quarterback 1 on a dynasty roster, but if this guy's your quarterback 2, man, you're in a good spot.
100%. I mean, Dak Prescott, quarterback of my beloved Dallas Cowboys. You guys see the jerseys hanging in the background. Consensus quarterback 7 of our prime bucket. And
almost in the veteran bucket for what it's worth. He's almost 30 years old.
Almost, yeah. What, 29 and a half, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as he enters that veteran bucket, he'll be the clear cut, not even close number 1 quarterback of that bucket. But he's the final elite real life quarterback in these rankings. We know that when he's healthy every single year, NFL wise, real life, fantasy wise, he's a top 5 to 10 quarterback in the NFL any way you slice it. The only problem with Dak from a pure production standpoint is that as he's gotten older, as he had that ankle injury a couple years ago, he doesn't have that rushing ceiling that he had pre-ankle. But as we know, he could still absolutely shred it with the best of them when it comes to just pure pocket passing. Put him in the pocket, let him make some plays out of structure. He's going to throw for, when he's healthy, 30, 35 plus passing touchdowns. And as we know, there's great value insulation here with Dak Prescott, given that elite passing ability, given the elite wide receiver 1 he has in this offense, and an offense that's scored over 30 points per game in games he started each of the last 3 years. This year, over 32 points per game since week 7. Last year was the high scoring offense in the NFL. Year before that, extremely high scoring offense. So we know when he's fully healthy, he can lead and, be the architect of an elite offense. But as I mentioned, he's a bit on the older side. You're not going to get that rushing ability. And you know that realistically, he doesn't have a path to be, a top 6 overall startup pick. He probably doesn't have a path at this point to be a top 8 to 10 overall startup pick. However, if you're taking Dak Prescott on that 1-2 turn, you know that you're going to get top 5 to 10 quarterback production value for the next 5 to 10 years with Prescott. So yeah, he doesn't have, the highest ceiling to accrue value, but he doesn't really have a floor where he's going to just automatically lose value. Like realistically, 5 years time, maybe he's a 2-3 turn pick, like we were drafting Russell Wilson this offseason.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of the floor play of what his value could be. Like you said, CeeDee Lamb probably going to get extended by the team. Michael Gallup signed an extension last offseason, will actually be healthy next year, coming 2 years off of the ACL tear. Dalton Schultz on a franchise tag, so he might be gone. But for the most part, I mean, this offense should lean in more of a pass-heavy direction, given that both of their running backs, one's a free agent with Tony Pollard, and the other one is Ezekiel Elliott, who can't, make a cut to save his life. So I would say we might even have more pass volume coming from this Cowboys offense this time next year if their passing weapons are healthy. Danny always talks about how he wants to draft another receiver that could lean itself to more passing volume as well. So yeah, I think very safe pick. There's not a ton of downside risk to drafting Dak Prescott. Like you said, there's not a huge ceiling from a value accumulation standpoint, but there is a good ceiling from a production standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you summed it perfectly. Where you're not overly excited. You're not, jumping off the moon if he's your quarterback 1, given his age. And like I said, if he hits the nuts, he's probably, a fringe top 3 to 5 quarterback. He doesn't really have that overall quarterback 1 ceiling because of the lack of rushing production. However, you're happy with him. If he's your quarterback 2, man, and you have, a Mahomes, or you have, a Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, whatever, and you're pairing them with Dak Prescott, absolutely elite pairing. Also, side note, as you'll see in the next quarterback, the first of a divisional round matchup. We got the Dallas Cowboys, and I'll let you take it away with the quarterback who isn't even starting this weekend, and yet he's still a top 12 quarterback in our rankings. The pinnacle, Trey Lance. I'll let you take it away with him.
Yeah, the clipboard holder this weekend. Quarterback of the 49ers. Consensus quarterback 5 of our foundational bucket. This is by far the biggest projection of our top 12
100%.
quarterbacks. And Because not only has Trey Lance not looked like an elite upside quarterback, which is how we have him ranked as the quarterback 12 right now, in his 4 limited starts that he's had. I remind you guys, this guy has started 4 games in the last 3 seasons because he opted out of 2020. And one of those was a monsoon in week 1 against the Chicago Bears where literally nobody could pass anything. But his backup is playing like a borderline elite quarterback right now with Brock Purdy. So there's 2 sides to this story. I'm going to break down both of them. The bull case, which is where we kind of lie in as quarterback 12 in our rankings, is that, well, if Purdy looks good in this offense, imagine what Trey Lance, a much better quarterback, a much better toolsy quarterback with physical gifts, could look like if he architects this offense. But then the bear case that some people might, point to as against Trey Lance is, well, maybe this offense operates better when you have a distributor type of quarterback, a game manager type of quarterback, which is what Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo have been for this offense. And even to some degree, what Matt Ryan was in 2016. With the Kyle Shanahan-led offense. And this is probably what led Kyle Shanahan to want Mac Jones in the 2021 NFL draft, which is what the rumors kind of were at the time. He's definitely risky, but the upside of this working out is Jalen Hurts. What we've seen with Jalen Hurts so far, quarterback 3 right now, overall, top 3 overall startup pick. If we get Trey Lance, operating this offense the way, if we just copy and paste Brock Purdy's production right now to Trey Lance in terms of fantasy points per game, we're talking about a guy who is the 2nd youngest active quarterback in the NFL right now at 22 years old. Only Sam Howell is younger than him, and he's going to be younger than Will Levis and Will Levis for sure from this upcoming draft class. And he serves as like a hybrid between distributor, which is what Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo have been for this offense, but also incorporating some of his own physical gifts, rushing for potentially 1,000 yards, 800 yards, and a couple touchdowns, 5 to 10 touchdowns, like we're seeing with a guy like Justin Fields, like we've seen with a guy like Jalen Hurts. The downside risk is that Purdy takes his job, but the upside is why we're ranking him here. The upside is why we have him quarterback 12 in our rankings right now. And even the downside risk of him, losing his job, getting traded to a different team or something, he's still a top 3 overall quarterback drafted in the NFL draft. I believe he'd at least have a starting gig at the very least. But again, the upside is why we're ranking him here. And the upside is why we're still willing to trade, a first and a second for him right now?
Absolutely, in a heartbeat. I mean, I get it. There's a lot of situational risk, and I will say, as much as I am a proponent of Trey Lance, he's got one of the biggest mystery marks in terms of what exactly his value on the market is. Because in some leagues that value the upside, youth that he represents, he's going to be worth 2+ first rounders. He's going to be worth top 12 level dynasty startup value. On the flip side, you'll get some more casual leagues where people don't think he's going to start next year. There's such a divide in terms of what exactly Trey Lance is worth in your league. However, like you said, we do know what he represents if he does get that job. Elite arm strength, elite mobility. And you mentioned the situation in terms of San Francisco. Philadelphia would be the best comparable. But I genuinely think outside of quarterback right now, San Francisco has by far the best roster in the NFL, and it's not even close.
Especially on offense, specifically.
The offense alone, you have a top 5 offensive line, a top 12-ish type of wide receiver, Debo, and you can make the argument when he's healthy, he's even higher than that. Top 5 level running back, top 3 level tight end. Brandon Ayuk, one of the best wide receiver 2s in the NFL. We're talking about an offense where it's quite literally a pick your poison situation. If you get Trey Lance, what he could be at his ceiling, not only are they a force to be reckoned with, I think that they're probably the best pathing towards a Super Bowl that I've seen in the NFL in quite some time. Because that is the level of elite traits that Trey Lance would bring to this offense. I think Brock Purdy's a fine quarterback. I think, he can manage the offense, like you said. He's playing that Mac Jones role, only to even a better degree maybe than what Mac Jones would have represented for San Francisco. However, if Brock Purdy loses this week or loses next week, you need that player that can get that elite ceiling. And I think San Francisco recognized that. They're traded up to number 3 overall for a reason. They gave up a ton of draft equity. They're going to want to see what exactly they need, what exactly it takes to win that Super Bowl. Because we're talking about a team that doesn't have divisional round in their mindset, doesn't have, NFC championship in their mindset. They are a Super Bowl caliber level franchise.
Yeah, like I said, Trey Lance is not even 23 years old yet. So he's still very young. He still has a lot of upside to go. This was a little longer probably than we anticipated going. on the quarterback position, but I mean, if you guys play in 2 quarterback and super flex leagues, this is very important position. It's the most important position in those type of formats. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you want access to our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0, brand spanking new, just dropped today with 2023 prospect rankings, with bucketed rankings, as we made reference to, with positional rankings, with rookie pick values and buy, sell, hold advice. All that stuff is available on patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. Link down below in the pinned comment in the description. And just for $10 a month, you guys can get access to that and a ton more other benefits like first dibs on dynasty decisions. Our prospect databases will be coming out soon as I grade the players throughout the winter. Prospect player cards with all of the grades on Bijan and all your favorite prospects will be coming as well. So definitely stay tuned for all that. Check out the Patreon if you enjoy. And with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.